I'm going to just say this. I'm going to lay the sacred cow out here on my desk and we're fixing to slaughter it. Carbs are not the devil. There, I said it. Come at me. I got the science to back up what I'm saying. Apples and sweet potatoes are not causing all the death and dying out here. So keto people, sit down. I said it. I'm not mad about it. Hey everyone, I'm Lucy Douglas. I'm a family nurse practitioner and I'm owner and CEO of New Beginnings Wellness Center and Spa here in Reston, Louisiana. I want to talk today, actually I'm going to talk for a couple of videos and subjects will dovetail one into the other. But I want to start talking about diabetes. November is Diabetes Awareness Month, and it's a topic and a subject that's near and dear to my heart for lots of reasons. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that a lot of my experience in home health and many years ago was involved in taking care of diabetic patients. I developed an interest and a passion, and also decided that I was kind of sick of what was happening out there in the traditional medical realm about how we approached that disease process in patients. And the whole paradigm of management makes my head explode because we are managing people into the funeral home. And so I really feel like this is important information. The reason I always introduce myself is that I'm hoping these videos begin to reach a wider audience, away even from North Central Louisiana, so that I can begin to impact more people, to teach you and to help you be better, more knowledgeable advocates for yourself when you are in a healthcare situation or a setting where you're needing to have a conversation with a healthcare professional, so that you can feel confident and knowledgeable to stand up for yourself and to speak as an equal with your healthcare professional and expect to be treated as an equal in return. So we're going to start today and start the several videos of conversation talking about insulin resistance. So diabetes is a disease that can be found inside you many, many years before it becomes diagnosable as type 2 diabetes. And I really need you to know that. That's a huge take-home point that I would like you to keep and remember today. That diabetes is not something that we wake up with one day out of the blue, that it wasn't there yesterday and you happen to go into the doctor and a blood test says, oh, Bob has diabetes. Well, Bob's had all of the mechanisms that lead to the point where you finally have a blood sugar high enough to be diagnosed as type 2 diabetes that is detectable. And that's why my lab work is so amazing, in that I go down and dirty looking for clues and problems before they become a problem. And so insulin resistance is a unique metabolic disorder. It's not a benign condition. It's like being a little bit pregnant. There's no such thing. And so that's also something else that I feel like is not communicated well, that there are these other precursor disease states that are serious and reversible. So that's a next take home point I want you to be sure you leave this conversation with, is that it can be found before it becomes diabetes, and it is reversible. So what is insulin resistance? When I say that word, what does that actually mean? Well, the anatomy of blood sugar regulation is pretty complex, and there are a lot of players. Some of the key players in regulating our blood sugar, which actually stays in a pretty narrow therapeutic range. So about 70 to 100 fluctuation. So pretty narrow, and that's where your body best functions if blood sugar remains in that therapeutic range. So the brain is a huge participant in the regulation of blood sugar, the muscle, liver, fat cells, the liver itself, pancreas, of course, because the beta cells of the pancreas are where insulin is produced, and then the bloodstream. So those are some of the major players. And so insulin resistance is a condition that develops over time where those cells that are supposed to be very responsive to insulin, in that insulin is a key, if you will, that opens the door of the cell and brings glucose or sugar out of the bloodstream to be brought inside the cell where it can be used to produce energy. So the cells begin to lose their sensitivity or their responsiveness to the insulin that you are making. So it's not initially a problem with your pancreas or your insulin production. It's a problem in the peripheral, in the cells, and it's detectable. So I actually have a blood test that I can do that gives me that immediate objective data, that feedback. Are your cells insulin sensitive, or are they resistant? Are they beginning to get resistant to your own insulin? And so then we can put together a plan for you that would then halt, and you can turn that bus around and go back the other way. So that is one of the very early and first mechanisms of defect that over time, left unaddressed, would lead to a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So what causes insulin resistance? Well, I think some of that is pretty straightforward, and you probably already know the answer. But certainly we see insulin resistance in people who are overweight. I won't tell you that with 100% that every person I've detected insulin resistance in was overweight, but I would say by and large that's a very common denominator. The other thing is people who are very sedentary. So if we're not getting regular physical activity, that can exacerbate insulin resistance that exists and also create the environment for insulin resistance to occur. Belly fat is kind of a clue that you could be insulin resistant. So if you're saying, Lucy, I've tried to eat better, I've begun to incorporate exercise into my life, but I just have this belly fat that's very stubborn, that's something that's really worth looking into at greater detail so that you can get more information about what's going on at the cellular level, and then what can you do to help your body function in its optimal state. And the other thing, and nobody wants to hear this and everyone rolls their eyes and you'll turn off on this video, but a diet of high processed food is probably the main driver of all of this. And so it's a complex conversation to have, and it's not something I can quickly cover in these short videos. But I don't think it's a surprise to any of you that I would tell you that a diet full of drive-through food is going to cause you to live to 100 and be vibrant and healthy. I think we all know that that's not true. And there's a number of reasons why that's not true. It's the makeup of what's in those highly processed foods. And it's not just the carbohydrates. So I'm going to just say this. I'm going to lay the sacred cow out here on my desk and we're fixing to slaughter it. Carbs are not the devil. There, I said it. Come at me. I got the science to back up what I'm saying. Apples and sweet potatoes are not causing all the death and dying out here. So keto people, sit down. I said it. I'm not mad about it. So it is the combination in the processed food of that simple carbohydrate in the form of your bun, your French fry, your Frosty, your soda, and the pizza, and what else? All of the things. I don't eat drive-through food, so I can't even give you all the examples, but those are the main ones. So it's the combination of those. A potato in and of itself does not kill people. It's the potato that's treated in the factory where it's made and then dropped into a vat of a nasty trans fat. And so it is the combination of the constant cumulative effect of exposure to trans fat through those rancid oils that all fast food restaurants use, every one of them without exception. Do you think any fast food restaurant is investing in avocado oil to prepare your French fries? I can tell you with 100% certainty they are not. They are probably using disgusting peanut oil, GMO, corn oil, canola oil, or some of those that are absolutely detrimental to cardiovascular health and will promote and create an environment of insulin resistance. So I'm just glad I got that out of the way, that I'm not a proponent of a low carb lifestyle. And there's not an ounce, an iota, a tish of science to back up the validity of that in the long term for health. So it is the combination of the simple carbohydrate in the presence of the trans fat that is so detrimental metabolically. Just a fun fact, I eat, I'd have to grab my macro thing, but I eat in the neighborhood of about 150 grams of carbohydrate a day. Am I obese? No. Am I insulin resistant? No. Do I eat drive-through food? No. But I eat whole foods. I eat fruit. I know, your eyes just rolled back in your head. I'm sorry. Hope someone's there to resuscitate the keto people because I eat fruit. I eat sweet potatoes. I eat some gluten-free bread that, of course, is made up of some simple starches. So those kinds of foods are not detrimental. It's the balancing of those and eating foods as close to the dirt as you can possibly get them. So French fries, I'm sorry to say, are not really close to the dirt. They've been messed with. You can do those at your house in a much healthier way, using your oven with a spritz of avocado oil or your air fryer, and then have that kind of a food, but prepare it so it's not so metabolically detrimental. So those are the things that are leading to insulin resistance, which I'm going to reiterate again is the precursor deficit or defect that leads to a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes over time. Now, how that will progress in each individual person is very individual, and there's no way with certainty to predict how long that would take. Because I've had patients ask me, and I can't speak to that. There's no way that anyone could truthfully, accurately answer how long will it be until I become diabetic. I've seen in some patients who've stayed with me, and I've seen some, despite my throwing myself in front of the moving train, they go on and progress to that diagnosis of diabetes. And I've seen it happen a few times fairly quickly over just a few years. So I'm not saying any of this to cause fear or anything. I'm hoping, and my prayer is that the information strongly motivates you and that you feel more powerful and knowledgeable so that you can then make, changes in your own life to change the course and the direction that you're going. When I was teaching, I used to tell students, it's like this as a former person who struggled, I had early signs of insulin resistance. And I kind of use the analogy that when I think back on those days and the decisions I was making about, okay, Lucy, you're headed down a path you don't want to go. It's like I was in a train station and there's 6 trains sitting there, and one's labeled heart attack, one's labeled stroke, one's labeled diabetes, one's labeled Alzheimer's, one's labeled cancer. Well, do I want to get on any of those? Of course I don't. But that's really where we all are. We are all in a place of very much being able to choose our own direction. So I got off the train to death that day in 2009, and I stepped on the train to life. And so my food has everything to do with keeping my internal environment peaceful and at optimal function. So what are some signs of insulin resistance? So some very simple things you don't even necessarily right away need a blood test for. And there's a very important measurement that's been being promoted in this realm of being able to detect insulin resistance for a while, and it's even more important than the BMI, and it's your waist measurement. So in men, you could be very much at risk or even have the presence of insulin resistance if you have a waist measurement greater than 40 inches, and in women, that's 35 inches. So just getting out a tape measure. And that's why a lot of trainers and people, health coaches and people that are working with people to promote their health will say, well, let's not just weigh, but let's also get measurements, because that information is also super important to monitor your progress. But when we're talking about insulin resistance, the waist measurement is extremely important. The other thing is blood pressure. That's easy for you to check. You can do it at the drugstore, the grocery store. I find a lot of people now have home blood pressure cuffs. So if you're seeing chronically often you're seeing your blood pressure greater than 130/80, that can be a sign that you are insulin resistant. It's part of a cascade. It's not just one thing. It's the combination of the things that sort of gives us a very clear clinical picture that this person very much might be insulin resistant. So blood pressure, we want our blood pressure below 130/80. A lot of our governing bodies have recently changed the parameter where we diagnose hypertension. It used to be if one had a blood pressure 140/90 over greater, that we would then diagnose them with hypertension. But now they've dropped that. And so anything in the 130s/80s is considered high blood pressure. So be checking your blood pressure. The other thing is fasting glucose. So a lot of people that I interact with do go and have blood work, maybe not as often as they should, but they do. Like if a woman goes for her yearly well woman exam, they will do blood and they will be checking that fasting blood sugar or blood glucose. But what I find often happens is that patients will get calls from the doctor's office or the provider's office and they're told the F word. Everything was fine. Well, that person's definition of fine and what the current research says is considered fine might be two vastly different things. And so what you need to know, if you're fasting, you haven't had anything to eat after midnight, you can have some water, but if your fasting blood sugar is greater than 100, then that is a sign of being insulin resistant. Actually, what I use as a parameter for a healthy fasting blood sugar for my patients is I want it 85. So if you're 99, don't be like, I'm less than 100. 99 is, guess what, closer to 100 than it is to 90. So that's a sign. Take it seriously. And the other important piece of that is that if you are getting blood work done on any kind of a regular basis, make sure you're getting copies of that and you're keeping track of it, because this is something you can track over time. And when I had my come to Jesus with myself in 2009, I was able to kind of look at a couple of years of my blood work, and I was seeing my fasting glucose creeping up. And so I didn't get over 100, but I got too close for comfort. So that's when I stepped off that train. The other thing that's commonly measured is triglycerides. So that's part of a 5-number lipid panel. That's representing the fat particles floating around in your bloodstream. So if you have triglycerides greater than 150, that is a sign of being insulin resistant. So it's extremely important. I'm just going to true confession, my triglycerides at the time of my epiphany were right around 250. Yeah, it's terrible. Well, I was the queen of, I was in home health and I wasn't a stranger to the drive-through window. I like those French fries and Diet Coke and the cheeseburger. I mean, I could totally put the hurt on that. So the cumulative effect of that at the ripe age of 47 was I was a freaking train wreck. I was headed somewhere I didn't want to go. With triglycerides, a 47-year-old woman of 250. That was 100% from my diet. The trans fat in combination with the simple carbohydrate. It's a kiss of death. So guess what my triglycerides are now? About 50. Because I eat fruit. Clutch your pearls. I eat fruit. I eat whole foods. So, of course, I don't have massively high triglycerides. So these are things, so I don't think that even if you're getting blood work done, I don't think there's enough of this kind of a conversation. You get that phone call. And as I will say again, the interpretation of what's okay and not okay can be vastly different. So that's why you need to know these things. You need to make sure you're getting your own copy and that you are able to have this kind of a conversation to go over your results and make sure you understand what all of those numbers mean and what that means about your internal health. The other thing is the HDL cholesterol. This is one that we loosely refer to as the good cholesterol. And there's a lot more information that we can learn about our cholesterol particles. And that's probably going to be addressed in another video because it's a lot of information. But for the purposes of this conversation, we will say that if a man has an HDL less than 40, So 40 and above is considered optimal for a man. 50 and above is considered optimal for a woman. So if a woman's HDL cholesterol is less than 50, that could be a sign of insulin resistance. So you can see I've given you several numbers, and you want to look at all of that in context, in light of like what is going on with you and your physical body. How are you feeling? There's some other blood tests that I would recommend and that I do that helps me put together the pieces of each patient's puzzle so I can accurately interpret what's going on in their internal environment, and we can make sure that they have the best possible outcome. So insulin resistance, it is a distinct disease state. It is not a benign condition. It is reversible, and there are clear signs, either in the physical appearance and in combination with objective data that you receive from blood work. So I can't emphasize enough that you're making sure that you're getting blood work at least yearly. And if there's a problem revealed, that you put in place a plan to correct the problem. I generally give my patients, kind of depending on the severity of what we find and how quickly I feel we can impact numbers, I'll repeat numbers in about 3, sometimes 6 months, just so we can have good objective feedback to know how well our interventions are working. And that just gives the patient so much encouragement, because then they realize how much control they actually do have over their bodies. And my own blood work is an example of that mine looks completely different than it did in 2009. And I'm 11 years older, so I'm older, yet I'm much, much healthier. So I hope this information has been helpful. We're going to continue to talk along these lines, and we're going to talk next time about sort of where insulin resistance unchecked and unaddressed then leads to and is often intertwined with prediabetes. So we're going to talk about that next time. I hope that you will post questions, give me your feedback. If you're appalled that I said the keto diet is not therapeutic and that carbohydrates are good, then, let's talk about that too. So thank you, and I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.